And welcome back to Jones & Company. I'm your host, Brian Jones. Today we're having a very exciting conversation with Stefen Deleveaux. He is the president of the CBA, that's the Caribbean Blockchain Alliance. Thank you for joining me today, Stefen. And so we were having a pretty enthralling conversation there about the education component and how we make it become much more practical. But I have a very practical question for you while we kick off this next segment. What is blockchain? Let's break that down. Which we should have done from the very beginning of this show. Let's break that down for the audience so they understand from a technological standpoint what it is and what that means for these open, decentralized economies that you've been talking about as well.
Yeah, and that's always interesting because it's such an abstract concept. Mm-hmm. It's always hard to really tightly break it down. But when I think of blockchain, I think of the internet. So in the same way, everyone uses the internet. Everyone uses the internet. No one really knows how it works, but it's basically kind of this network, this online network architecture, this online network infrastructure that connects everywhere in the world that anyone can use. And in the same way, a blockchain is very similar to the internet in that it's also a network infrastructure, a network architecture. But what the internet does really at the end of the day is it allows us to communicate with each other through these networks anywhere around the world, across the globe. And that's the main thing at the end of the day. We do a lot of things on the internet, but it always comes down to communication. Whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's whatever apps we're using, we're normally talking to each other or we're normally accessing something, which is still a form of communication. Mm-hmm. Even payment through your credit card online is a form of communication, right? Mm-hmm. That's you communicating that you're trying to buy something, it goes to your bank, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So what a blockchain really is kind of the same thing, where we can also communicate, but more importantly, now we can actually access and interact with value, meaning that, okay, if I'm sending you a WhatsApp message, I'm sending you communication from one end to the other, from me to you. Mm-hmm. Now with blockchains, through these crypto tokens or cryptocurrencies that sit on top of the blockchain, they are now, instead of just communicating to you, I'm actually accessing value. So I'm not just sending you a message, I'm sending you value in the form of what we call money. And money is really just all these different things wrapped into one. Like, we think of a dollar as money, but a lot of different things can be money, right? Depending on what we all say it is, depending on what society says it is. So at the end of the day, it's really just this network architecture, this network infrastructure, where we're not just using communication, we're using value.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, and so this technology has been built upon, right, by lots of developers, lots of communities have now come together and utilize this technology to build, I guess, digital economies, right? And so now what we're seeing is a whole new era of the internet, right? No one used to call it Web 1 and Web 2 until Web 3 came out, but now we are in the Web 3 era, and you spoke about what that is to an extent, but it's hard I think, for some people to envision what an internet that's dominated by cryptocurrency is going to be like, right? Because just think about the past, right? In terms of the emergence of cryptocurrency on the scene on the internet.
Right.
It emerged through the Silk Road, right? And it was used for lots of nefarious activity, and it gained a very bad reputation.
For sure.
Because people were using it anonymously to conduct commerce online. And so now you're saying that has evolved quite a bit, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, even going back to what you said earlier about these decentralized economies. So in the same way we have a Bahamian economy or a global economy, we also have an internet economy. Mm-hmm. So even if you think of just everything going on to do with crypto as just this internet economy, what does it mean? It means there are things being bought and sold. There's value being transferred back and forth. And it all, people who studied economics know everything runs by incentives. Mm-hmm. Everything is just something of value or something that's incentivized between one person or another or one group or another. So a lot of what we're seeing with Web3, and we can just think about or imagine, is related to these internet economies. And what does that mean? That means you could think of your group chat with you and your boys on WhatsApp, but now you have this wallet, this multi-sig wallet, meaning that, let's say there's 4 or 5 of you, each of you have this kind of attachment to this wallet, meaning that, maybe all of you have to sign it digitally for you to access the money, that kind of thing. And then all of you can come together and put it towards, whatever, put it towards a certain goal. If y'all want to start a company, you can put this towards a company, or even if you want to like pay for a trip, you can put it towards a trip. It's kind of just really adding value to, it all comes down to adding value to the communication that you're always doing, so that actually paying for things is easier, creating some kind of economic value is easier, economic interaction is easier. So that could be through, we go into like decentralized finance, which is basically, again, like things that you would do at a bank or things that you would do at a stock exchange, but without a bank or a stock exchange. It's just the crypto network, it's just the blockchain network, which means you can do things like lending, you can do things like swaps between different assets, and that's a bit more intense. But if you think about that idea, and then you think about, again, we can talk about the NFTs, what that artists are using, and this is an important point too, actually, because say you have a piece of music or even just a document, like a Word document on your computer, and if I have that and I send it to you because you want access to it too, it means how the internet works, because it's just communication. It's just, I send you this document, and now you own this document, but I also own this document, which means that now, because I'm just sending you a copy, we both now have access to this document. That doesn't work for money, and that doesn't work for art, because we may want that art to be unique. Like if I own this piece and I sell it to you, you don't want me to also own it, because that defeats the purpose, for the most part at least. So what NFTs do, again, they're just these unique kind of tokens, but how blockchain works at the end of the day, because remember, it's all peer-to-peer. And we saw this, like if, I would say, not to be all technical again, but if you go and read the Bitcoin white paper, it kind of explains all this really well. Just the idea that, again, if I transfer you this Word document, we both own it. When Bitcoin came out, the way it works is that if I have this Bitcoin and I send it to you, I don't own it anymore, you own it, which wasn't really possible before on the internet. Or you had to have, like, again, a bank or a credit card or a PayPal in between to actually verify that I don't own this anymore, now you own it. So what blockchain actually did was allow, and what crypto actually did was allow me to send this thing to you without me still having it.
And without anyone else having to validate it.
Exactly. The network does it automatically, which means that now we can add, again, this value to these network infrastructure. We can add money to it, because now we can actually have an economy where we couldn't have an economy before. And that kind of goes again into all these other things, like, oh, I can send you a piece of art that's attached to the blockchain, and you can own it without me also owning it. And it kind of goes into this whole circular aspect of how does money work? What happens when we add the ability for you to say, okay, I can see that I own this online, and I can see that I don't own this anymore because I transferred to you. It all goes back to that at the end of the day.
Gotcha. That's interesting. And so you spoke about adding value and communities basically coming together and building value on top of this technology. One way that we are seeing that, I guess, demonstrated practically is with the emergence of DAOs. Right? There's tremendous uptake, I think, globally. There must be thousands of DAOs now in existence. So, if you will, help our viewership understand what is a DAO.
Yeah, I need to take a sip for this one.
Yes, a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization.
Yeah. So, of course, in the space, everyone just decides to use the biggest words possible for these things. But a DAO is essentially just an organization that you interact with crypto at the end of the day. That means that, again, the example I use with, like, Union Boys in a group chat, but now you use in a wallet that all of you have this kind of connection to or access to. But of course, in a way where it's not like one person can't just run off with the money. You have to, it's decentralized, so that at least multiple of you have to kind of confirm and verify that y'all are using it for something. So a lot of these organizations are based off that simple structure of, okay, if we want to come together to buy something or to create something or push for some goal or some cause, whatever it may be, and we're using, everything costs money. And so we're using this money, this digital money, to actually make that happen. How does that work? And then that's really the bottom line of it. But of course, there are all these other aspects, like what does decentralization actually mean? What does autonomous actually mean? And it kind of, the best way to think of it is a co-op run through cryptocurrency or run through the blockchain. So what does a co-op mean? Co-op is like, it's not quite a traditional business, or it's not quite a traditional like nonprofit. It's more of, it's structured different in that, it's not just like a CEO or a president that makes all the decisions with a board, and then everyone else is just kind of a worker, right?
Right.
Co-ops are supposed to be more autonomous, meaning that you have a not necessarily fully flat, but at least a flatter system where more of the regular worker has a say in what happens in the co-op.
Right.
There's worker ownership, meaning that if you are trying to become profitable, all of the workers also get a piece of that profit. It's not, you don't just get a salary, you actually get a piece of the profit. And there's worker participation or worker governance, meaning that when there's decisions to be made, that can happen through, it's not just one executive, or it's not just executive and the board making decisions. Right. There's voting systems, and there's more of an organic structure where people who are actually go to this place day to day or are part of the same day to day actually do have some say in what happens. And of course, this happens in different forms, and there are many different styles of governance. But that's really the central thing of it at the end of the day. And of course, being that these are, if it's on cryptocurrency, it means it's fully online, which means it's global by default. So now you can bring it more easily bring in, all these people throughout the world to come together. It can be small, just you and your boys, or it could be something that's huge and global, all these people coming together to make one thing happen, or to push for one thing. And they're really, it doesn't matter whether it's like trying to be a for-profit company / co-op, or just a nonprofit organization trying to, push for better climate change, climate change
or like the CBA,
infrastructure.
for example. Would the CBA consider organizing itself as a DAO? Would that make sense?
We're not a DAO yet, but we are. It has to be slow because of the type of community it is. It can't just, and this is actually a really good point too. So if you're a community or an organization that wants to turn into a DAO, there's kind of two options, right? You could just flip the switch and fully decentralize, within a day. But of course, that's going to be a huge shock to your organization, a huge shock to your community. Whoever deals with you on a business level is going to be like, wait, what's going on here? So it definitely, especially down here, I think it definitely has to be a slow process, and that's what we're looking at. And it's a thing called progressive decentralization, which just means that you decentralize slowly, you become a DAO slowly. So that's what we're looking at, just this kind of slow process.
Let's look at that a little bit more closely. I like that concept, progressive decentralization.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So when you say flip the switch, essentially you're talking about going from being a centralized, incorporated body or some sort of formal organization to an internet organization, right? That's decentralized, controlled by its members. So essentially any token holders are able to participate essentially equally on equal terms.
And of course, if you think about, if you have a bank account, now you have to figure out how to switch from always operating through this bank account, always operating through maybe checks, for example. Now going through these tokens. Now everyone in your company or everyone in your co-op or everyone in your organization may not even know how to use it. Right. So going from one end to the other automatically.
But do you have to make a full switch? Can you not have a hybrid situation whereby?
And that's where the progressive decentralization comes in. Yeah. So now it becomes this slow process where you're just figuring out what you need to change, figuring out how it could work if you bring more people in, that kind of thing. If you bring in, whether you want to create a token, whether you want to have more people, and what we've seen for the most part is a DAO creates a token. That token is distributed fairly evenly throughout if you already have a community, fairly evenly throughout the community, depending on different factors, right? And then, this is where the cool part of Web3 comes in. Those tokens can actually become part of your governance structure, meaning that those tokens can be used for votes. Those tokens can be used for all kind of different things. And this is where I guess I don't want to say composability, but that's what it is really, where it's just like you have a base layer of something and you can just add different things on top of it. So it's like I have this.
It's like Legos.
It's exactly like Legos. It's money Legos at the end of the day, which is kind of crazy to think about. All right, so now I have this group. Now I have maybe a wallet that all of us have access to, and we're building all these different things on top of it. And that's. I mean, we could go into this all day, but that's kind of the essence of what a DAO is. It's also very extremely new. So if you think blockchain is new, DAOs are like an embryo basically, and it's evolving literally every single day. And there are a lot of just conversations with people figuring out how it works, how we can make it work better. There's still a lot of issues with them, as you can imagine. There's still a lot of things to figure out, especially in terms of like the registration aspect or incorporation aspect, whether they should incorporate or not. There are all these different aspects that are coming together over time.
Right. So speaking of whether or not a DAO should be incorporated, right? I mean, that's basically asking what degree of centralization do you want,
Exactly.
right? And so do you think it's beneficial for DAOs to be incorporated?
That's a really good question. I don't have a strong opinion on that yet. I do lean towards no, but I think there is opportunity for a country that could focus on DAOs to say, okay, we want to create a specific kind of a registration process for a DAO. And seeing how this is something that's blowing up all over the world, to have, I mean, we've already seen with the DARE Act, a lot of blockchain and crypto companies come here and try to, and not just try to register and incorporate here, but also try to figure out how to add to our economy. And I think that if we do the same thing with DAOs, where the Bahamas has its own kind of DAO specific registration, that would actually be, I guess I could say this. I think it would be even more of a influx to this economy than the DARE Act was. I think that could be the next level to the DARE Act.
Interesting.
So again, I do lean towards no, but if there is a specific, regulatory infrastructure specifically for that still leaves a lot of room for openness and change and whatnot, because this is a rapidly changing ecosystem.
Right. Didn't they test something similar, I think, in Wyoming? And do you know how that is, the level of success that they've had?
There are quite a few DAOs registered in Wyoming, but for the most part, the DAO ecosystem is not a big fan of it. There's too much left on the table. It doesn't allow room for flexibility, and I think that's going to be key at the end of the day, this actual room for flexibility. So most people a lot of people have tried it, but most people I don't think that's going to be largely successful at the end of the day.
When you say there's too much left on the table, what was seen as the shortcomings there?
I would say at the end of the day, I'm trying to remember everything, but the main thing would be, it's too strict, something that potentially includes everyone in the world, and you're trying to kind of shove it into this very small U.S.-based regulatory infrastructure. It just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work.
So it's not flexible at all.
Right.
It makes it harder for non-U.S. people to be involved. So that kind of just stops it in its tracks at the end of the day.
Understood. Very interesting. Well, obviously, the Bahamas has a track record in product innovation, right? From smart funds to bringing the foundation, the icon, and other products that we've created. The Bahamas Executive Entity. So we have a number of investment vehicles. I'm sure that's something that our community could certainly tackle.
Absolutely, and I think the space is wide open for it, and I think the opportunity and the benefit is astronomical. So
indeed, and so when you talk about the opportunities, let's look forward a bit in terms of what's on the horizon in the blockchain space, right? So first and foremost, let's stay focused on the Caribbean, right?
Yeah.
What's happening in the Caribbean today, and where are we moving in as a block, as an economic block in the blockchain industry.
Yeah, I love that you said economic block. I think that's where we should be looking at.
Pun intended.
Exactly. It's a great question. I mean, we've already seen like the sand dollar and then the ECCB Dcash, and I think that's going to continue. We're going to see more countries do this kind of dollar, central bank digital currency, which is just the dollar, but reflected on the blockchain, right? I think we're going to see a lot more of that, and I think we're also going to see just a much wider open use of different varying kinds of cryptocurrency platforms and programs, and also just people creating their own blockchains, and for maybe government programs or ministries and departments using it to connect with each other to make things just easier to use, and we're already starting to see it to a small degree. I think beyond that, we're going to see a lot of people enter the specific Web3 world, which is like the decentralized finance, the NFTs, and the DAOs. And again, I think the biggest opportunity is for DAOs, because DAOs can be used for NFTs, DAOs can be used for DeFi, but it also allows anyone to just much easier get. So when most people interact with cryptocurrency, I don't trade, but a lot of people trade, and a lot of people just have to try to figure out how to buy it, which again down here is very hard to do for most people. But I think with DAOs, especially when you're accessing this global ecosystem, it'll be easier for people to get paid in cryptocurrency for the work they do, rather than having to go out and try to buy it or try to trade it. So I think even that just opens up a whole new world. So now you can access, you do some work for this DAO, you get crypto in return. Now you can access these kind of lending programs and platforms, or DeFi in general, where you can buy an NFT. Like all these different things kind of open up. Right. So now the Bahamas can become a part of this internet ecosystem, this internet economy, in a much stronger way. And now we have all this opportunity to just bring more value here to this country.
Indeed. So I mean, you mentioned people actually making the shift to earning crypto as opposed to just buying it or speculating, on crypto.
Exactly. I think I should also mention too that most people think about Bitcoin being volatile and whatnot, going up and then going down in crazy ways. But of course there are, especially for people who are earning cryptocurrency or crypto assets, there are these things called stable coins, which allow, they're usually tied one-to-one to the US dollar, but there are different currencies as well that are reflected in that. Just in the same way that our CBDC sand dollar is tied to the Bahamian dollar. So it's the same kind of idea. So you can earn this money without worrying about volatility or fluctuation. It'll be one-to-one kind of thing.
Right. So yeah, okay. So earning in this new economy, the Web3 economy, and I guess there's many ways to earn in this new economy as well. So you mentioned one way, basically earning through DAOs, contributing to organizations, and being compensated accordingly. But I understand that you can actually play video games now to earn cryptocurrency. Play to earn is what they call it, right? What other ways can you earn crypto?
No, that's a good question. The play to earn thing is something I always forget about, even though it's become huge and is rapidly growing. And what we've seen is, I'll just give the biggest example, this game called Axie Infinity, which a lot of people, it's really interesting because it's a game where, it's kind of like Pokemon, where you're kind of fighting these monsters, but you get in return, I've never played it, so I don't know the specifics of how it works, but you get in return this kind of cryptocurrency. And what we've seen is that in the Philippines, where wages are very low, the amount people earn is very low, and their currency value is low, that has actually sustained people who are actually playing this game. I'm not sure how that's going to evolve in terms of people here, where our dollar is actually quite strong, but there are all these different opportunities that are coming up, and just there's so many different things happening. I can't even. Right. Every day something. It's literally every day something else is new. And of course, again, for our artists and musicians, for example, there's this opportunity to sell their products through NFTs and get this money in return. So.
Right. And so I guess one thing that's on the horizon is in the whole blockchain world is these metaverses. We keep hearing about metaverse. Facebook changed its name to Meta. what is a metaverse, right? How does blockchain fit into it, or how does the metaverses fit into blockchain?
Yeah. The metaverse is, first of all, is not Facebook, but it's just kind of these decentralized virtual worlds. I'm always curious on what people think about it. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it. But basically the idea is, especially during the pandemic when we were all stuck in our houses, if you had access to a computer and access to the internet, it's like, oh, well, you can if you're not necessarily looking at things, you can't go to an art gallery, but maybe you can go to an art gallery online. And with the blockchain aspect, now it becomes, okay, you're not just looking at something put online, now you're actually interacting with this economy. So I can look at something and then buy it just by scanning a QR code, for example. That's really what it is at the end of the day.
Right, interesting. So we're looking at a very bright future that's full of technology. The environment is actually very, very exciting, isn't it? Right, it's the blockchain space. We see it touching from small communities, children straight up to adults, and I guess it's never too late for anyone to get into this space, is it?
This is something that's still extremely early. Everyone's still trying to figure out how it works, what they can do with it. Just literally, do some research, try to find out. Don't worry too much about, I don't want to say don't worry about buying and selling that aspect, because that's perfectly fine. But just try to understand how it actually works and try to play around with it. That's most important.
I think that's a great message, not to get too caught up in the hype of the speculation, but try to understand why is it such a big deal,
exactly.
right?
Actually using it rather than speculating on it.
Exactly. I think that's an excellent, great message. So thank you so much, Stefen Deleveaux, President of the CBA, for joining us today on Jones & Company. It's a wonderful show.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully we can have you on again.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you to our viewers. This episode of Jones & Company was brought to you by Agio Digital. And thank you for joining us. Have a good night.